Now, welcome back to my F1 series of videos where I'm going to talk about Formula One as a sport from a perspective of an insider, from a perspective of someone who works in the industry, and from the perspective of someone who's been working in the industry for a good amount of time and has a good amount of knowledge as well as the passion for it. In this video, I'm going to tell you about how Formula One cars are made. What are they made of? How this process is done. Now, first of all, I think it's important to talk about the number one material that about 95% of Formula One cars are made of. And that one material is carbon fiber. Okay. Now, the other 5% of F1 cars clearly is, say, about the engine and some little glass and Kevlar and whatever else might be involved in these Formula One cars, aluminium and other little tubes and lines and rubber and wiring, etc. Okay, so carbon fiber being about 95% of a Formula One car, I bet you wonder, how is it made? What are the little secrets behind it? These are all things that are common knowledge, things that you could just go online and probably look up, but isn't it a lot more fun to just listen to me ramble on about it from a perspective of someone who gets to work with this sort of stuff? So carbon fiber is a fabric woven material infused with resin, which is, it's like a glue essentially, a very tough strength. And it's one of the strongest fucking mass-produced materials you pretty much have in the world, right? Fiberglass and other materials are similar in terms of being woven and being a combination of a woven material infused with resin, but they're nowhere near as strong as carbon fiber because of its amount of fibers running through it. I mean, you've got 3K, 6K, 12K. That's 3,000, 6,000, 12,000. You've got different weights of carbon. You've got 200 gram, 240, I don't know, 300, 380. You've got 600 gram, which is a heavy, very heavy, thick, I've got a bottle of water in my hand so I can't show you, but really thick, heavy ply of carbon. They're called plies because you usually have just layers, plies, right? Just like wood. So this, for example, heavyweight carbon, this 600 gram carbon, 650 gram carbon, for example, is usually used for tooling, where tooling is something that's laid up, a hell of a lot of layers of carbon, hell of a lot of plies of carbon laid up on a pattern block, which is usually, I don't actually know what the fuck pattern block is made out of, I can't lie, I'm very ignorant. I'm going to try and look it up and put it on the screen somewhere. Pattern block sometimes can cost upwards of 30, 40 grand to get a pattern for a specific, I don't know, pad of a Formula One car, for a specific new pad coming in, for a specific new upgrade, etc. Okay, so into this pattern block we then lay usually 8 or 9 layers of carbon, heavy combination of heavy and light materials, in order to basically create a mold. And this mold is then basically being thick enough and being durable enough, going to be able to last quite a few heat cycles in the autoclave and being laid into with the material quite a few times. So the team is then going to be able to get a hell of a lot of parts out of this mold. So that way the investment is well worth it. It really makes you wonder what the history behind like buildings like that are. Do you know what I mean? How long was it here for? And like, why has it been abandoned? There's so many questions. And that's what fascinates me about abandoned buildings. So let me know if you want to see some more exploration of abandoned buildings in the comments below. Now, there's 3 different methods of laying carbon fiber. Okay. 2 of these being a little bit outdated and something that used to be done on a lot more of a mass scale in the past. Okay. And those being wet laying, and the other one carbon infusion, which I'll give you a quick explanation of these 2. Wet lay is when you put a dry sheets of carbon on, usually marine industry uses this quite a lot, so boats, racing boats, etc., right? So you would get a massive boat hull, which you would use as a mold, etc., and then you would lay dry, massive plates of carbon, almost like a fucking curtain, right, of carbon, like 2 meter long, and then you would start laying it into this hull of a boat, and you would just literally then get a paintbrush, you would dip it into some resin, and you would just start painting over it. Obviously you have to get your right ratio of obviously you've got to have your mixture right. Do you know what I mean? Your thickener to resin ratio, because otherwise you're going to fuck up the mixture and the glue, the resin, isn't going to go off properly. So that's wet lay. The other one is carbon infusion, which is a very interesting way of doing it. And basically what you've got in an infusion is a very similar process, right, to pre-preg, but you actually have resin flowing through the bag. So what the bag is, each and every single pad's created out of carbon fiber, whether it's wet, whether it's carbon infusion, or whether it's, as I will say now, pre-preg, pre-impregnation, which is the #1 method used by all of the F1 teams to create their cars. Pads have to go in the bag. The bag is actually a vacuum bag, and it literally gets all the air out of essentially the bag in which the pad is placed, which sucks the material down and really squeezes it under pressure. And that also goes into the clave afterwards, which essentially sucks the air out of it, pushes the pad down, squeezes the air out from air pockets from in between the plies of material, which means there's not going to be any dry areas, or well, fucking there shouldn't be any dry areas, or any dry patches, or ideally, hopefully no resiny corners or anything like that, which, by the way, usually happens when you either have pockets of air in between the material, or you haven't hit all of the corners in your bag, etc., because you have to poke all the corners in the bag so you haven't got any tight corners, because as you can imagine, when this vacuum bag is in the clave, hell of a lot of pressure goes through it and it can very easily pop if you've got any tight areas around this bag. So you know what, some skill is definitely tied to making these carbon fiber Formula One pads, because some of them, believe it or not, are very, very in depth and have a hell of a lot of aluminium metal inserts, melt outs as well, which you've also got melt outs, for example, aluminium melt outs or plastic melt outs, which are bits around which you would laminate the carbon fiber pads to get a tube or to get a very complex pad, which afterwards they actually get molten out, like they melt them out of the carbon pad and they literally just turn into liquid and flow out, and then you're left with a very complex carbon pad. Hell of a lot of these pads, by the way, are made out of insane amount of bits put together, essentially, like rear wings, front wings, things like that. I mean, you've got, it's a little bit different now with the simplicity and the change in the rules since a few seasons ago when we've gone back to the ground effect cards. But previously, prior to that, if you know your Formula One and the complexity of the front wings, there was hundreds of little winglets and pads which were at the very end glued or bolted together and put together to form a front wing, for example. Okay, now let's talk about pre-preg, the #1 thing. Okay, the #1 method for how pretty much every Formula One team, and not just Formula One team, but all of the suppliers, because there's a hell of a lot of companies, believe it or not, supplying the Formula One teams all over Europe, all over the world probably, but I primarily operate around Europe. And what it is with pre-preg carbon fiber sheet, essentially, it's the dry carbon pre-impregnated with resin already, and then it gets rolled up into these massive rolls of material, you know, few meters long, etc., you know, few meters wide and a hell of a lot of meters long, and then they get wound up on this roll, and then they get frozen, and then they get shipped out to Formula One teams or these supplier companies, which usually have all in-house freezers, massive freezers, in which they'll store their material and then obviously use that material when needed. All right. Believe it or not, these F1 cars and the amount of layers and plies of carbon fiber isn't the only thing that is laminated into these molds to create pads such as rear wings, such as front wings, such as the chassis and the actual entire body of the car that you see. There's a hell of a lot of other things which could go into it, such as little metal inserts which you have to prep prior to putting them into the pad, little films of glue, which you would wrap some of these inserts in. I don't know, you could have roller cells and different types of cores that go into these Formula One pads, essentially, which are, how would I explain it? They're very tough core that goes inside of these pads to thicken them up and to eliminate the amount of carbon that needs to go in them without compromising the structural integrity of the pads. That's how I would explain it. Okay, there's very different types of core that goes into these pads. We call it core because it's literally sandwiched in between carbon fiber, essentially, in these pads. and that core is often breathable. That core is often, I don't know, made out of aluminium, made out of different materials. I can't go too in depth on this, but essentially that is sandwiched between the pads. It thickens them up. It actually adds into the structural integrity because the resin will then flow through the core sandwiched between this carbon as well when it gets up to temperature in the clave. And yeah, it becomes the part of the structure essentially. And you actually will never get to see this core unless you see an F1 car crash, and then you might be able to see that when the pads snap in half and start getting brittle, which is what happens with carbon fiber. It doesn't break or bend like you would see on a car from back in the day that was made out of aluminium or different types of metals, okay, or even road cars. Carbon fiber is brittle and it cracks and it snaps, and hence why if you see a Formula One car and you see a crash on a Formula One track, they could literally crash freaking 150 miles into a wall, and chances are nothing would happen to them because of the structural integrity and the strength of carbon fiber and how safe it makes the cars nowadays. I completely forgot to mention that some of these pads will also require you to have little sensors and channels carrying sensors inside them as well. As you can imagine, Formula One cars have sensors everywhere, front wings, rear wings, fucking any part of the car. So I can't tell you exactly where they're at, what they look like, and how they're put in place, etc., how they're prepped. But I can tell you that the majority of these pads have them, and which is extremely important for when you see the engineers talking to the drivers at the track, and the drivers tells them, oh, I think something's wrong with my front wing. I think something's wrong with my rear wing. These engineers can then tap into these sensors through their little computer on the pit wall and check it, readjust it, look at the setup, look at the airflow and things, etc. So yeah, just a funny little fact for you right there. Hope you find that as valuable as I might do. It was definitely McLaren in the 1980s who introduced carbon fiber as a material in Formula One, and it has been used ever since. And obviously, Formula One industry is just like aerospace industry for the planes. Okay, things and technology trickles down into road cars, trickles down into the world and the things that we use every day after years of use in Formula One. As we've seen with carbon fiber, it's now becoming a lot more widespread material when it comes to not just road cars and performance road cars, but also stuff like medical, stuff like army, stuff like, I don't know, fucking road bikes and stuff like that, marine, aerospace. I mean, I could go on for ages about this. So just a quick little video I wanted to make about how Formula One cars are made. So the process is, as I've mentioned, you've got your layup book or whatever manual of how many plies, what kind of material, what kind of weight of material, what kind of inserts, how they're placed in, what kind of core, etc. And you just follow it and you just create a pad, and then you vacuum bag it, sometimes multiple times, to get the air out of it so that it doesn't, so it's not bulky, so it's not squishy. Do you know what I mean? You want it to be flat and stick down so that you can actually see the corners and see the features on the mold. And then, yeah, that all gets vacuum bagged, that all gets sealed. It has to be airtight and sealed. You can't have any leaks in it for various different reasons. And that then goes into the autoclave, which heats up to, I don't know, could be 180 degrees, could be 150 degrees, could be 130, or could be low pressure, low temp. God knows. Do you know what I mean? Every single pad can have a different cure depending on what it is, depending on what's inside it. Because obviously, as you can imagine, each material, each weight of material, and each different insert or core acts differently. So yeah, that's just a quick little video I wanted to make for all of you people that might be interested in Formula One. Whether you're a fan already, or whether you, I don't know, might be a fan now, or whether you might just find it interesting. I just wanted to share that information with you, because being someone who's passionate about the sport and the industry, and someone who gets to work with this sort of stuff, I thought if I can share some information without breaching any contractual obligations, I might as well. Do you know what I mean? So let me know in the comment section below if you potentially learned something new. If you found this interesting, leave a like if you want, and subscribe if you want. Like I said, I'm not too bothered about that. What I care about the most is your comments, your opinions, and your thoughts in the comment section below. So let me know your thoughts. And yeah, that's about it. That's everything I wanted to talk about in this short little video. Have a lovely day.